and online. All right, our guy Josh Pate, man, is Mr. College Football. He's all over the place. The show has exploded, continuing to grow. And I don't know if you saw earlier this week, he had a great tribute to LSU fans kind of going back to his start. Pate has really kind of been a nuclear bomb over the last couple of years as far as college football coverage. I mean, just a guy that was a local news guy, did the YouTube thing, and next thing you know, he's signing contracts with CBS. He's traveling all over the country to the biggest games, and, you know, he is a go-to source for college football fans to keep up with what is the latest and what's happening in the sport. And he gave a real cool shout-out to the people of the LSU fan community the other day, and I reached out to him. Pate has been kind enough with his time to come on our show when we've invited him on, and he's always been great. And, was told him, kind of thank you for the people, from the people, and, come on and let's talk about what's going on in college football. And he's here this Wednesday morning to chop it up with us. So it's good to have him back. And remember, you can follow him at Josh Pate CFB on all of his social media. And, of course, the YouTube is a great follow as well, as you already know about that. If you're watching this show, you know about Josh Pate and college football stuff he does. Pater, good morning. How are you?
What's up, man? How have we been? We got a big game coming up down there this weekend. I get to come see you.
We do, man. I'm looking forward to you getting down here for sure. What has your impressions been of college football up until this point? It feels wide open, right?
Yeah, I was looking at some cross tabulature, I guess we would call it, from how I would power rate teams just in a model versus how those teams stack up to years past. And, man, we do not have elite teams right now. Mm-hmm. Even the number one team in the country, Oregon, I was just kind of looking at them against 2019 LSU, 2020 Alabama, even the Georgia teams those next couple of years. I mean, they'd be like a touchdown underdog plus against those teams. So we're talking about a really wide open field, and I don't just mean wide open in a sense that a bunch of folks can make the playoff. This is the kind of year where you really got to recalibrate your mind to understand. I'll use LSU since I'm talking to you right now. A team like LSU, which is sitting, I don't even look at the AP hardly, they're in the teens somewhere. That kind of team in the past would never be viable to make a run to win a national title. I mean, unless it was one of the elite teams that happened to stumble early in the year. LSU is a flawed team. A flawed team in the teens in years past would never be looked at with any kind of objective shot to win a national title. LSU and Alabama and Ole Miss, all those teams are in the teens right now. Jordy, if those teams got hot and they stayed healthy and some bounces of ball went their way, those teams could be playing for a national title in 2 months, and it would not shock me.
Transfer portal, the biggest reason why no dominant team anymore?
I think so. I think there are a number of reasons. I think that's one of them, but it's not what it is on the surface. I was up in, where was I? I was in Athens in the spring, and I sat down with Kirby. Now, we had him on the show, but that dude went for like an hour before we hit record. It was really eye-opening. And he talked about this, and he talked about the vulnerability he thought they would have at Georgia this year. And he said, I know everyone talks about the portal, but I really don't think they understand how it's victimizing teams like us. And he wasn't saying it to be felt sorry for or anything, but he was saying, I'm not going to lose my starters. We're Georgia. We're good. No one's stealing our starters. But what's happening is desperate programs out there who know they need to win immediately, they're willing to come in and overpay for your backups. And we are not going to match that price because they're not worth it, frankly. And in the aggregate, you leave yourself vulnerable in the fall to one injury, like it left guard or whatever, making you go from playing a 1 to playing a 3. And it doesn't take long in this sport, especially, for you to have a couple of 3s on the field for them to expose you or them to make you so vulnerable that you really can't operate at the level you want to operate at. I've seen Texas be that at tailback at times this year. I've seen Georgia be that. Alabama was already going to deal with that because the portal also cost them guys like Caleb Downs, for example. But I think that's the reason. Now, here's the short term. The short term is what we just talked about. The long term is I'm not sure I've arrived at a place where I just think that's the new normal. It's the current, it's the reality, but I don't know that it's the new normal, only because, Jordy, I have never watched this sport since I've been alive and studied it before I've been alive. I've never seen this sport change and the Blue Bloods not eventually leverage that change for their advantage. Now, I have seen changes where in the immediacy, the Blue Bloods get caught off guard and they're exposed for a little while, but normally they tilt the table back in their favor. Now, everyone wants to try and tell me college football's permanently changed and nothing's like it used to be. And on the surface, in the abstract, I believe that. But at its core, brother, the same powerful people and the same powerful interests that have always run this thing are going to continue to run this thing. So enjoy it if you enjoy the competitive balance at the top because of the parity that the portal has provided. My advice would be don't worry about the future and enjoy it while you can, because I'm not sure they're going to let that remain in status quo.
We share the same sentiment on these college football playoff rankings. In fact, we have somebody inside of our chat that talks about they go to your the Josh Pate college football poll over the college football playoff poll. It gives us something to talk about here. Where I guess if you were to stack the rankings at this midseason point, any of this makes sense? What do you take away from them?
They had me do this the other day, which was kind of a weird exercise because I never do it. CBS wanted me to come on and do a hit, and they said, could you send us what your rankings would be? And it was like learning to walk for the first time, because I always do the power rating stuff. I never actually put teams in the order I would if I were a playoff committee member, because those are two very different concepts. So I put mine down, and to give myself credit, I got fairly close. The one team that I'm scratching my head a little bit on is Penn State is still at 6. And I went and saw them this past weekend in person, and it's the same Penn State, good, solid team. No game breakers offensively, can't stretch the field, good enough defensively to keep them in games, but unless they turn the ball over a couple more times, probably not going to get a win. And yet I'm seeing them lose to Ohio State, which is okay, but they fell only to 6. And my problem with that is I had them at like 10th or something like that. My problem with it is Indiana is 8, I think it was. And I understand why Indiana would be at 8. I understand the strength of schedule argument. I make it all the time. In fact, I think we could do a better job defining strength of schedule in the sport than we do, and that's a whole other conversation you and I can have. But I get why they're not higher. But my question is, what happens if Indiana goes and loses in 2 weeks or whenever it is when they play Ohio State? If they're competitive and they lose, you and I both know what happens. What happens is Indiana falls off a cliff.
Yep.
Indiana falls to like 17 or 18, and you'd look at their resume and say, they lost on the road to the same team Penn State lost to at home. Penn State's punishment was, quote unquote, fall to 6, which still puts them in prime position to host a playoff game if they don't lose another game. And meanwhile, Indiana, it was like, because your brand name is not high profile enough, we'll pat you on the head, we'll put you in the top 10 for aesthetics purposes, knowing all the while we expect you to lose to Ohio State. And once you lose to Ohio State, we're going to press this button, and the trap door is going to open under your feet, and you're gone. So a lot of the complaints that people from the outside have that I always listen to about how brand matters way too much and preferential treatment is given, sometimes it's a case-by-case thing, but in this case, I think there's a lot of validity to that. And the other thing is, you see all those SEC teams, there are 7 of them in the top 16, which is why sometimes I have a problem with people labeling this LSU Alabama game the way they are. They're labeling it an elimination game. And I understand the fundamentals of why they're saying that. But I keep coming back to, if you're telling me these 2 lost teams are playing in a conference where like half or almost half of the top 16 is comprised of that conference, is it really responsible for us to say we value strength of schedule, yet label these games elimination games in early November? Like, is there not a world, if chaos happens, where there could be even a 3-loss team from a conference that strong that has a viable path? I don't know. That's just me speaking out loud. I'm far from a committee member.
Josh, this LSU Alabama game, what's different about it with DeBoer's Alabama coming in compared to what it has been under Saban?
I'll speak sort of just to pretend there's a question mark over all these words I'm saying because I really don't know if this is the case. I know I went up to Neyland when they played Tennessee, and they didn't handle that moment well. They didn't handle that spot well.
Mm-hmm.
That environment rattled them. And the thing I came to learn about Saban's Alabama, and I think a lot of their fans may tell you this too, is if I were going to bet on Alabama, I always felt more comfortable when they were on the road. I thought they played tighter at home than they did on the road. I always felt like Alabama's going to give me the best version of themselves on the road. They were just so equipped and so prepared to handle it. Plus, they played in big games every year because Saban always had them in contention. Now, it's way too early for me to have this indictment against Kalen DeBoer because I've really seen him in one of those spots this year. But they handled it poorly. So that's fresh in my mind. So if they go down there Saturday night, I mean, he can coach at Alabama 20 years. I mean, you won't face an environment more rabid and more unmanageable if you don't have your you-know-what together than Saturday night in Death Valley. So you'll get a really good glimpse really quickly about how his Alabama handles this. I just wonder about the mettle, if that makes sense. I wonder about the big game profile of the team because the one really unknown that I don't think a lot of folks were focused on when he took the job is at Washington, you did great things, but you never played in premier games. You can't because Washington doesn't play in premier games because it takes premier brands to be in premier games. Well, this is one of them. And you're going to play in a couple of them, maybe 2 or 3 of them every year if you're Alabama and you're the head coach there. This is one of them. And I can't quantify it. You and I could talk all day and we can't put a number value on this, but there are big game coaches. There are like big program coaches and players. And that's what it's what it's always taken to win this matchup. And we start to learn about how he is in this moment. It's not the full picture, but we will start to learn it Saturday night.
Last one, I'll get you out of here. What's your take on LSU at this point in the season?
Biggest wild card team in the country. I said that when they went into the A&M game, and I still say it with them coming out of the A&M game because it's really as simple as this. I don't know what your opinion. In fact, I wish I could give you like 30 seconds of the time back. I want to know, do people down there just think LSU is incapable of running the ball? Because some teams are like that. I look at them, I look at their personnel along the offensive line. I think if they committed to running the ball more, they'd be more successful at it. When they outrushed Arkansas, I was pleasantly surprised by it. And the reason I mention that is because if I were to just get a requisite amount of commitment to the ground game, I think a lot of these problems for Nuss don't disappear, but they greatly reduce themselves. Sure. And then LSU has the ability, I still believe this, to play a complementary enough brand of football to where they can be competitive with or beat anyone they come up on. With 2 losses and their backs against the wall, I still think there is a path where they make the playoff and make noise in the playoff, but you got to put the team in the best position to succeed, and I'm not sure they've done that at every step this year.
Be great to see you this weekend, man. When do you get in?
I think I'm going to come in tomorrow night. So I'll be down there Friday and Saturday. Yeah. And then, of course, I got to keep my eye on the weather, too. So I'll be very distracted this weekend.
For sure.
Storm chaser.